In this episode of Spearlift, I speak with Brian Murphy, where we discuss the critical issues that surround the upcoming U.S. presidential election, such as COVID-19, the Supreme Court nomination, the economy, and our election prediction analysis. So stay tuned. Viewers, please remember, if you like our content and find it engaging and enjoyable, please subscribe, like, comment, and share this video, as it greatly helps to expand our message and inform others of these very important topics. And if you are listening on our podcast platform, make sure to also share with others, and I greatly thank you so much. Brian, welcome back to Spearlift.
Thanks, Seb.
Pleasure to see you again. And before we get started, I want to let our viewers know, and especially for those who have followed us since the beginning of March of 2020, that the intention of Spearlift is to provide content, information, and inspirational conversation with experts from around the world on a variety of themes to help us better understand ourselves, the world around us, and really, my goal since the beginning has always been to make the understanding and life's journey more insightful, stimulate curiosity, and be as uplifting as I can to the viewer and listener. That's really what I've been trying to do always since the beginning and will continue to try to do. I want the best for you and for all of us. And believe the journey to a better you is more of one that is inquisitive, accepting, open, and really just full of love. Our perceived notion of good and bad, ups and downs, is all part of this process. It is the journey of which we call life itself. On this particular episode of Spearlift, I want to have a dynamic back and forth with Brian, whom I've known for a very long time, and we've had many conversations in our, friendship together regarding life's issues, societal issues, politics, and I believe this would be an enriching conversation, especially this time in 2020. To share with our viewers, because honestly, those that make top-level decisions and run our societies have an impact in our life one way or another. And I believe for many of us, we want to be active participants in the societies in which we live in and have a voice for the circumstances that are created around us, as it is a part of our life's journey, and I really think imperative. This particular election in the United States in 2020, many have commented and regarded it as one of the most important in the country's history, whether it be addressing the coronavirus-related issues, Supreme Court decision that can have an impact for generations, the future of the economy, and several more topics. So I believe it is of utmost importance having this conversation, and with someone I've known, as I said, for a very long time, which is Brian, and we've actively had several enriching discussions about life. So this conversation will be interesting as well, because I've lived outside the United States for several years, namely in England and now in Mexico City. So my perspective as a U.S. citizen will wait from speaking from another country right now, also being married to a Mexican national, and also having deep roots throughout my life in Latin American culture. So Brian, let's get started. And we're going to cover four main topics on this episode. We're going to cover COVID-19, Supreme Court nomination, the economy, and have a little fun trying to predict this election, which will probably be virtually impossible. Okay? So topic number one, COVID-19. So obviously, as everyone knows, the coronavirus in 2020 has been the major topical headline on a global scale in every country, virtually, I can imagine, and part of our waking and sleeping and daily mental item, for better or worse, mostly worse. Unfortunately, it's taken so many lives in so many countries, and we send our deepest condolences to those who have lost loved ones due to this crisis. Trump has received criticism, Brian, for his response to COVID, namely when Bob Woodward's book was published, it suggested he knew the gravity of this problem early on. People still continue to criticize his handling of it, even now, and it's a huge election item in this time in October. Obviously, he has contracted it, and it seems now that he's, after contracting, getting over it and recuperating. I do recognize as well, he did ban international travel early on in the year. Some argue it helped to slow what could have potentially, we don't know, but there are assumptions that say a potentially even greater spread in the country, in the United States. And it seems, I don't know how conclusive it is, but Biden does criticize the ban, or has criticized the ban. Testing in many parts of the country has been ramped up, and actually the United States has one of the highest testing rates than any other country in the world. And he has also partnered with the company Abbott in deploying this 15-minute testing kit at a large scale across the United States. So I do see where he has been proactive against the pandemic. However, still being heavily scrutinized by many people and many citizens across the United States. And many actually feel Biden's approach, or what his approach could be, would be more appealing in handling the virus and keeping people more safe and out of harm's way in contracting the virus. Additionally, the lockdowns seem to have had a very adverse mental health concerns on people, and just spikes of depression across the board, and really have affected many people's economic situation, especially small businesses. And I can tell you that has definitely impacted us here in Mexico as well. So, Brian, let me ask you, regarding the coronavirus in the United States, does the handling of this situation up to now and going forward, in your opinion, favor either Trump or Biden in getting back to a sense of normalcy based on where you are and what you see in your region in the United States? And then secondly, how do you view people's opinion of the lockdowns?
So in general, most people have been adversely affected because of the lockdowns. There is a difference of opinion. Some people are a lot more cautious. They are legitimately afraid to take part in what would have been normal everyday activities before the crisis. So I would say you have various opinions, and a lot of them are in conflict of each other. So a lot of people more in the smaller towns, a lot of people more on the right typically are wanting to open up quickly, or have stayed open, or are planning to open to some sort of capacity despite certain regulations that may be in place. So we have started to see more civil disobedience, where businesses, especially bars and restaurants, are pushing back. I know that's something worldwide, not just here, not just in the U.S., but worldwide. Bars and restaurants have been absolutely crushed by the pandemic. With most countries, I would say, implemented some sort of lockdown. So it's not unique to the U.S., but the long-lasting effects and certain precautions that are still in place do seem to be lasting more than others, at least in Illinois, where I'm at. Things do seem to be clearly dividing along partisan lines for the most part, where the strictest measures, the strictest lockdowns have been in Illinois and New York, in California, the largest states population-wise, but all of them headed up by Democratic governors. In Michigan and Wisconsin, both states headed by Democratic governors. Both Democratic governors tried to implement the same lockdown procedures. Wisconsin's governor was struck down about 5 days into it, and all the restrictions were lifted according to the court. And then in Michigan, the lawsuit just went through against Gretchen Whitmer up there to, saying her lockdown orders were unconstitutional and stripping her of those powers. So the overwhelming consensus seems to be that the way a lot of governors have implemented the lockdowns has been severely unconstitutional. Now, nationwide, there was a nationwide stay-at-home guideline directive, but things are a lot different, where all of the pressure in the U.S. is coming either by municipalities or by governors, typically, when it comes to lockdown measures or mask mandates or whatever the case may be when it comes to COVID. I did see in the debates Biden bring up a couple times Trump's handling. I saw Kamala, in the vice presidential debate, bring up the same issue, how trying to say that Trump and Pence, if they would have done something differently, that maybe less lives would have been lost. And whenever we get into that, we're talking about hypotheticals here. And I think most people understand that. If you want to believe that Trump should have locked things down more and had more stricter precautions, that he cost people lives, then you're probably going to listen to the information that's telling you that's currently out there right now. If you want to believe that Trump did the best job ever and did everything he possibly could, that's out there as well. So with the internet age, there's all sorts of news, all sorts of media that's telling you basically whatever you already want to believe or whatever you already think. So the real challenge is finding the accurate information that's out there, that's as little biased as possible.
Yeah, which is kind of hard to do. I think it's become a very politicized issue in general in virtually every country, and particularly in the United States, from what I've seen from abroad, especially in an election year. And I spoke about this issue of lockdown versus not lockdown with somebody recently in Mexico, and I kind of had this idea of it in the springtime of 2020 as well, that because what I'm trying to get is that there is a sort of inherent sovereignty of which I guess you should or shouldn't be able to decide what to do for yourself and for your life, obviously, right? Obviously, this is a novel coronavirus, and we have seen that has taken many lives, very, very unfortunately, and it does have a very pernicious way of attacking the body, unfortunately, that can really be damaging, and that's very tragic. Where I see it being a little bit complicated or convoluting is that, especially here in Mexico City, where we have a very large socioeconomic divide, okay? A lot of people depend on getting paid every 2 weeks, like money right in their pocket, and they have to feed their family of 4 or 5, and some of them are single parents as well. So there's almost no way, or especially in those times, it was really difficult to even tell them, people who were in those situations, to just stay at home. You can't go out and earn money for about 3 weeks until we try to get this pandemic under control, which initially in the spring they said, well, it'll just be a few weeks if we all do our part. And then
it was 2 weeks to slow the spread.
Well, that was in the U.S. from what I saw, and here where we are in Mexico, it's still not under control. But they've kind of have new measures where people will go out and about with their business and work, and because they have to. I mean, the point I'm trying to get at is that the initial argument in the spring was, okay, stay at home. We don't want anyone to contract this. We need to get under control. We can't let people die. And we still, at that time, didn't know enough about this virus. We know so much more now, and there's so much more data about how it affects people and who's most vulnerable and things like that. But at that time, especially in April, May, around that time, It was even at that time difficult to tell certain people, okay, you got to stay at home for 3 weeks, and that may compromise your paycheck, So there was
that may compromise their ability to feed their family.
100%. So that was earlier when this was just starting, and even now, several months later, I think it's a really tough call because, I mean, on the one hand, you don't want to have people get infected, and if something goes awry and they get terribly ill, then who's that on? And who's we don't want to see that. Obviously, nobody wants to see anyone get contracted and get severely. No one wants that, But at the same time, I do see, and I have seen there. Maybe you can speak to this a bit more about how people are really desperate in many states to really get back to their normal activities of work because they're behind on their bills and payments.
Yes.
Are you seeing that?
Yes, very much so. And it's going to get even worse. There's been multiple moratoriums on evictions. There's been local moratoriums, state moratoriums. There's federal moratoriums. And I believe the current federal moratoriums have been extended through November. But at a certain point, these eviction moratoriums and, all the assistance for people's heating and electricity and all that sort of thing, all this stuff's going to go away. It's not going to last forever, the assistance and the moratoriums. So these people are still going to have to pay their rent. The holidays are coming. They're worried about not having any presents, and that's the last of their worries because they have to worry about rent in the meantime and food in the meantime. So things are so incredibly complex and over politicized by this situation. There is a real problem of not reanalyzing. Like you said, in April and May, we didn't have a lot of data. So we were kind of at a loss as to how to handle it. But now let's look at all of the data. Let's reevaluate these policies. It's something along the lines of 30% of restaurants, at least in the state of Illinois, 30% of all restaurants will never open their doors again. They closed them early on in COVID. They may have tried to reopen. They may have tried to do things with, 25% capacity, with reduced hours, all of this stuff. But anyone in the restaurant business knows that your margins are slim and you need volume. The only way they're making money is with a lot of customers. If the business is full all day, they're making money. If the business is empty, they're losing money. Yeah. So a lot of these businesses are now in that position where it's been empty for a while. And there's no assistance coming federally. There's no assistance coming locally. And if you do accept the federal assistance or the state assistance, there's a lot of terms that have to be met in order for you to, get the grant and actually not have to pay it back. A lot of these businesses are finding out now they're going to have to pay back the loans that they were given to stay open until this point. And they're not going to be able to do that unless things are back open.
All right, Brian, let's move to our second topic, and that's the Supreme Court nomination. Today, actually, October 12th, 2020, today was the first day of the hearing for Amy Coney Barrett for her Supreme Court nomination procedure. And honestly, speaking to people there in the United States from abroad, and also general impressions from seeing news and particular outlets about people's feelings on this is that this election cycle for them has now become almost a single issue vote, meaning that they will vote either feel more motivated to vote because of Amy Coney Barrett's Supreme Court nomination, or vote against it, basically. And some of the main issues seem to be regarding the lean bench that the Supreme Court would have, conservative versus liberal. Issues like Roe v. Wade and the ACA, Affordable Care Act, where there's going to be, my memory serves me right, a ruling on that in November. So this has become a tremendous juggernaut as of recent for people who are voting. And some people, almost from what I've heard and seen and spoken to with several people, this has become almost a single issue vote now. There's like 20 huge issues, but this is now on the top of the ticket as far as what's on people's minds. I guess that would put the court around 6-3, conservative, the liberal.
Yep.
So there's that, but then secondly, people are concerned because, and what I've seen as well, deflections from the Biden ticket of the issue of packing the court if the Democrats were to take control of the other branches of government. So, and the presidency, obviously. So how do you see that as being an issue? And for people who are going to vote and where you are, and people you've spoken to there, as far as this election goes, and how big of a weight does that have on people's minds going into this election? Because those decisions really set a precedent for the country for several decades.
It's a huge motivator. I mean, right before the previous election, you had, Merrick Garland be nominated, and, it wasn't voted on because the situation back then was quite different, coming off the second term of Obama. And so now, it takes a completely different toll. Before Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the news that she had passed, the main issue was COVID. It was all about COVID. And that quickly brought something else into people's focus. So I'd say, I don't know if it would make a difference, as in, somebody that was originally planning on voting Biden to switch their vote to Trump, or somebody to switch their vote from Biden to Trump. But it definitely makes a huge enthusiasm difference when you realize what the stakes are at that point. And, it was brought up in that first debate between Trump and Biden as well, because it is a huge issue. I think overall, Amy Coney Barrett is popular. Overall, she's viewed positively. Now, there is a certain media campaign to promote her Catholicism and cast doubt in people's eyes whether, she would make a difference on Roe v. Wade. She has played it kind of close to the vest as far as how she would vote on something like that. But I think it also, you have to keep in mind that a challenge to Roe v. Wade has to make it all the way up to the Supreme Court before that even comes into play, and is yet to happen since. So I don't think the Roe v. Wade part of it's as big of an issue, but a lot of people on the right see it as a huge issue. Growing up in my family, and a lot of people that we knew were pro-life, and that was their single issue. If you had a Democrat that was pro-life, they would vote for that Democrat too. It was truly single issue.
Right.
And so now with Amy being assumptively, most people assume that she's pro-life. I'm not sure as far as her public statements, if she's confirmed that. It's possible. But she is a Catholic. She did go to Notre Dame. The Catholic Church has a policy of being pro-life. So that's why people, I think, mostly assume that she is. But it's even a bigger concern when you talk about the potential challenges to this election in 2020. In the year 2000, the election, Bush and Gore went down to the Supreme Court to decide if there was going to be another recount, basically deciding the election. So with all the mail-in voting, with all the new policies in place this election, there is a real fear among a lot of people that it will be a contested election and that it will go to the Supreme Court. But whether or not Amy Coney Barrett sat, it's 5-3 as it stands right now. So the difference between seating her and not seating her, as far as the election goes, is not even a consideration.
Yeah. No, I get that, and that's it's quite interesting because it's just a whole nother variable, honestly, and you know, she does, of course, have that background, and I think people we'll come to that whole topic of the election prediction, because I think it will kind of feed in to what and how it will motivate and in what method actually people will vote for their chosen candidate. And we'll come back to that in a second, because I think that will be later a good segue into how and this whole voting situation will turn out. So we'll definitely touch on that in just a moment. So let me go back actually now, or go into, my apologies, to our third topic, which is the economy. Several argue that the economy and voting purely based on economic just issue itself favors Trump more, and some polls do indicate that. Criticism has come out that Trump's economy has not recovered well, though, since the pandemic hit. However, Trump and his administration claim that there's definitely a good return coming. They refer to as a super V, and that claiming that next year in 2021 will be the best year yet for the United States. And Trump touts frequently that his administration has had the best economy under him before the pandemic hit, with record level unemployment for Americans, including Black and Hispanic people. But Biden criticizes him as not being good for groups such as farmers, as he said in Pennsylvania recently, which he claims have been worse off during his presidency in the totality of things. Some critics are wary, though, as well, of Biden's tax proposals, saying that they may drastically go up if he's elected, and that by cutting the Trump tax cuts, people may be worse off. Also, some say Biden's Green New Deal would further increase taxes across the economy and also leave many people employed in certain sectors, such as who have coal jobs or petroleum-based jobs, certain energy sector jobs in general, unemployed. So, Brian, how do you see, as far as economics and people voting from their wallets, how do you see that playing out between Trump and Biden?
I would say there is a consensus that the economy was doing great earlier in the year. Whether it's along partisan lines, I wouldn't say. I mean, there was a pretty good understanding in January, February, the first part of this year, that things were doing better than we've seen in a while. The stock market was at highs, record highs. But just for everyday people, unemployment was very low. The ball for job seekers was almost entirely in the job seekers' court. You had a lot of businesses that needed good quality candidates and, more positions than candidates. So things were in a very good position for the average everyday person earlier in the year in many different metrics. As far as the Trump tax cuts, also universally agreed upon in the business world that those were a huge boost to the economy. And with any tax cuts, you're not going to see an immediate boost the second that you pass these tax cuts. I think it is fair that, they were passed in 2017. So here, 3 years later, you really started feeling the effects of those tax cuts. One of the first things that Trump did.
Right.
So by an objective metric, the economy was better. Has COVID put a huge damper on that? Yes.
Yeah, like any country,
But yes, and it's put a huge damper on every country. It's put a huge damper on a lot of industries. Food and beverage we talked about a little bit, but also the cruise industry, the travel industry, anything that's connected to tourism.
all of these industries have been devastated by COVID.
Do you feel though, Brian? I'm sorry to interrupt you. Do you feel in general, or do you get the impression where you are, or people you speak to there in the United States, that people will vote for Biden based on economic issues? They'll vote, as the expression goes, they'll vote their wallet, because of seeing a better economy under Biden in 2020 and going forward?
I've yet to hear anyone make the economic case for Biden. And as far as polling goes, that bears out too. Polling in the U.S., Trump's winning on the economy still. And it's the economy stupid is one of those old lines, and I think it will come down to the economy but when you say the economy, that means completely different things to different people. If you're talking about the housewife or the single mom with 3-4 kids, what does the economy mean to them? Well, how much does milk cost? How much does the stuff that I need cost? How much does gas cost to get my kids to and from school, to and from wherever they need to go? There's different metrics depending on who you're talking to. But just in general, from an objective standpoint, it's mostly universal consensus that Trump is better for the economy.
Yeah, I from what I've seen from the outside, I see more of the sway and favorability going to Trump regarding economic issues and COVID to Biden. I don't know. I don't know if that's the same kind of consensus you've.
I could say possibly. The COVID issue to Biden, I think, may be overstated by the media. The U.S. media is overly representing, I think, people's fears and people's true issues. Most places that opened up early, most places that stayed open despite other orders, have boomed, have done well because of it. People are coming out to support them. Anywhere where there's a concert, whatever it's outside, it's socially distanced, anywhere where people can get around the regulations and still come together is still successful. So just from a, fellow community member, just from that perspective, people aren't as fearful as I think a lot of people would lead you to believe, especially once more data comes out.
Sure.
As far as survival rates and all of those sort of things.
Yeah. And, again, as time goes on, as more knowledge and evidence and data is presented with, the coronavirus, as, better therapeutics come out and eventually a vaccine, people feel a little bit better, I think.
Well,
or
and real quick
better.
too, I think Trump getting COVID actually helps him on that issue ultimately because 2 million, I think, is the case number. There's been 2 million cases or positive tests in the U.S. So that's a lot of people who are going to relate with having it.
Right.
And the vast majority of them survived and are probably still going to vote in November.
Sure.
So I think that also lends credence to the president, and it also gives him a perspective that Biden doesn't have. Trump can say, yeah, I went through it. I know what it's like. We can beat it. And even you mentioned the Bob Woodward comments, even those comments, he clarified the reason why he didn't, treat it as big of an issue as maybe it was because he didn't want to cause panic. He wanted people to stay calm. And it's extremely essential for business, where no matter where you are, to have a calm public if you're going to do business. If people are panicking, there's going to be certain items getting stockpiled and you're going to have shortages on the shelves. We saw this. We saw a lot of this early on in the pandemic. So even if you want to say he was wrong for not, saying how serious it was right off the bat, his
the reason why is clearly logical, because you don't want people to panic, and we've seen what happens when people panic. Good things don't happen when people panic.
Yeah, and I think that was his argument that he was saying before. He's like he made that conscious decision to not let the general mass public, just
to maybe downplay it a little bit. You could say.
I mean, yeah. So there's both sides that say, okay, well, he shouldn't be so secretive about something that is quote unquote or thought of at that time, especially so deadly. But at the same time, some do give credence to him, not allowing, mass panic, So there's both sides of that for sure, and it is what
like
it is.
Everything else, it can be twisted however people want to twist it.
Right.
So.
Well, and so for our final episode, Brian, this will be fun. Let's try to predict a winner. So we are 3 weeks, I think about 3 weeks out from the general election.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm going to present with you some data points here, okay, briefly and pithily, is that right now I see in the Real Clear Politics on their website that Biden is up 7 points in Minnesota, battleground state. Up 7 points, Wisconsin, battleground state. Up 7 points as well, Pennsylvania, battleground state. In the general election, up 8 points, battleground state. Okay. When I look, so that's the Real Clear Politics average. Okay. Now, I want to tell you something else. Let me just open up my phone here. Hold on. That at this time in the last election with Hillary Clinton, the Real Clear Politics average at that time in Wisconsin had her up 6.8% around this time as we're filming in October 2020, when Trump actually won by 0.8%. And right now, Biden is up 5.5%. Okay, so this time in the last election cycle, Hillary was up 6.8, and right now, Biden is up 5.5 in Wisconsin. Okay, and Trump won by 0.8 in the actual tally in the end. Okay, now in the Real Clear Politics average, I think this is Pennsylvania, Clinton at this time in that last election cycle was up 8.6. Trump won by 0.7. Biden is projected now up 7.1. Okay, let me just go to two more. Michigan. Clinton at this time in the last cycle was up 7.7. Trump won by 0.2. And Biden is up 6.7. Lastly, let's just take North Carolina, another battleground state. Clinton was up 2.4. Trump won by 3.7. And Biden is up now 1.4. Okay. On as well, there are people that I have looked at who follow like local county polling, especially in battleground states, and early voter registration. For example, in Maricopa County in Arizona, which is a very important county to win in Arizona. Right now, the GOP has 100,000 more registrations up this year than the Democrats. What's another one here? And also in Pennsylvania, it's way up as well. I don't have the number right in front of me. I got too many things open here. I think let me just switch back here. Oh yeah, in Wisconsin, in the early voting projected votes right now, according to organization called Real American Politics has Trump up 59.64% and Biden at 35.49%. These are actual numbers. And Waukesha projected Trump up 77.43%, Biden at 17.78%. And they claim if Trump gets at least 65% of the vote in Waukesha, he can lose the entirety of the South. This is Wisconsin, West, and flips he made and still win the early state of Wisconsin by a decent margin. Okay. The strategy, from what I've heard from the Trump campaign, is they're going for what they call the TIGO states, Texas, Iowa, Georgia, Ohio, which certain other pollings say that they're way ahead in those states, and then focusing on the Panhandle, Florida, Arizona, North Carolina, and then it becomes what they claim to be a 1 out of 4 game at that point, which means if they handle all the TIGO and the fan areas of the country, then the 1 out of 4 game becomes winning one Rust Belt, which is either Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Minnesota, or Michigan. So, look, I am in sort of a mental disarray of what polling is right, what is not, how mail-in voting is going to really affect the... I really, truly wish every vote counts, no matter which side it comes from, because, you know, everyone deserves to have, you know, their voice in it, and freely, you know, elected democracy. It's extremely important. So, but it seems like the mail-in voting and the return of those votes is an utter disaster right now. So how do you see November 3rd playing out, and maybe the weeks after, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think, I mean, it shocked us all. Anyone who was watching the 2000 election to not have a winner. You know, every other time before that, you know, election night, who won? You know, they knew the night they thought Dewey beat Truman, but Truman actually won. You know, just it created a whole new dynamic at that point. Like, what does happen if we don't know election night necessarily? And in 2016, it came kind of close. I don't believe it was decided until maybe 1 or 2 a.m. And one of the sides refused to concede until the next day. I don't know. I think playing out November 3rd with all the new complications, the states have had the mail-in ballot system in place now for, you know, since they announced it. They've had time to staff it. They've had time to make sure that all the votes are counted. But there's no guarantees that results will be in election night. So even though it pains me to say this, and I really, really like knowing the winner on election night, I think it's going to be more like a 1800s election where you did not know the winner for weeks afterwards, because of the logistics of everything. Now, if it's a landslide one way or the other, that's different. You know, we might know that night if it's a landslide. Depending on what happens, there's still, like you said, a few weeks. There's still time for a big October surprise to come out on either end. There's still a lot that can change between now and then. But you saying that Biden is doing, you know, slightly worse than Hillary was in these battleground states, and Trump won them, only makes it even that much more of a possibility that Trump could win them again. There is what some people call a silent vote or a silent bloc that plans on voting for Trump, but doesn't acknowledge that publicly for fear of reprisals. So I think that bloc is going to make a huge difference, whether or not it materializes. But if that bloc materializes, if the mail-in vote is tepid
if the participation is not great. And I know a lot of the predictions are that turnout is not going to be increased. It's, expected to be about the same. The enthusiasm is far more on Trump's side. Driving anywhere, I drive all over the state for my job. Driving anywhere, I see Trump signs everywhere. I see Biden signs here and there and in select areas. Democratic bastions, Democratic strongholds are going to stay blue. That's my prediction. Republican strongholds, Republican bastions are going to stay red. Everything in between, I would say right now it's leaning red. The riots put things in perspective. There's a lot of flight from the city leaving. There was just a report in Chicago Tribune that something along the lines of 3 in 10 homeowners in Chicago proper have moved to the suburbs, and there's a severe shortage of available houses in the suburbs. So with the dynamics of everything at play, I'll go ahead and say Trump pulls off an upset based on the numbers that I see now. But like I said, there's things that can change in the meantime. So it'll be interesting.
Yeah, it's going to be quite a cycle. And what I've heard from certain pundits is that there may be a red mirage appearing that Trump will win. And then there will be a lot of argument that, ballots all of a sudden show up, were not counted, and then gets tied up in the courts. And part of the reason, going back to what we spoke about with Amy Coney Barrett, is that they're trying to get her seat. And if she were to get her seat, that would help to solidify the Supreme Court decision on the election in December. So that's what I've heard. We don't know. You've heard it here, folks. So Brian, thank you so much again for this special Spearlift episode, in a very unique year that is 2020, when anything can happen. We're coming to realize, except alien invasion. We'll see. So we think
knock on wood.
Yeah, we'll see. Hopefully that's our next new hope. And thank you again, Brian. And we would love to know your comments, Spearlifters. Let us know what you think what will happen in the election. Let us know what you think, if you're in the United States especially, about this whole cycle and how it may or may not affect your life on certain issues. We would love to hear that, and we wish you all the best, and we'll see you in the next episode.